Armchair critics is a phrase referring to those who complain or criticize a situation or a person without being directly involved in that situation or having a complete understanding of the person's character and intentions. This term comes from people who will watch sports from the comfort of their armchairs and criticize the team's players, strategies, or coaches, but do so without fully understanding the full context of the situation. The thing is, we can disavow wrong behavior and choose to not be an armchair critic at the same time. It's easy to critique when you're not the one playing the game. When it comes to people like Joseph Smith, it's easy to criticize and judge when you live in a society and culture 200 years later that have very different views on racism, religion, and even morality. It's easy to critique when you aren't the one trying to figure out how to restore a church, when you aren't the one worrying if you are doing enough, not doing too much, or not doing it right. It's easy to pass judgment when you aren't the one feeling the joy, the pain, the fear, and the hope of bringing others closer to Christ. It's easy to point fingers and make judgments based on superficial perceptions, but the reality is often far more complex. Our role isn't to pass judgments on how others may have failed, but rather to make the most of what we have to make the world better. This is not saying that we shouldn't denounce anything that we think is wrong. It is definitely encouraged to disavow racism, sexism, sexual promiscuity, and any other wrongdoing. The issue is that armchair critics oftentimes show a lack of empathy because it's easy to critique when you aren't directly involved with the hard work and the challenges faced by those doing the work. Sometimes the problem isn't with the criticism itself, but with the way that it's communicated. Even valid points can be ignored or dismissed if they're delivered in an aggressive or condescending manner. If you don't agree with someone, the best way to approach the situation is with empathy and understanding, trying to put yourself in their shoes and understand where they may be coming from. We can't fully appreciate someone's position or the decisions that they've made unless we strive to understand their experiences and their constraints, or even their weaknesses and their flaws. Everyone says that if they were in that person's situation, they could do things better. But once they're the ones in the spotlight, with the press breathing down their neck, critics around every corner, and the weight of expectations on their shoulders, they often find that it's not as easy as they thought. Navigating a path where every move is scrutinized and any error is amplified can be incredibly daunting. It's easy to judge from the sidelines, but when you're the one making the decisions, when you're the one who has to balance competing interests, managing resources, and consider a plethora of unforeseen circumstances, it's a whole different story. On the other hand, true constructive criticism is offered with an understanding of the context, a consideration of the feelings and efforts of those involved, and most importantly, it proposes loving solutions or alternatives to the problem at hand. Remember, we have the power to shape our reality. If we decide to default to complaining and criticizing, we shape an environment of negativity and frustration all around us. It is easy, and I would say it's even lazy to judge when you aren't the one facing persecution, when you aren't the one questioning new ways of doing things and wondering why God would or wouldn't allow certain things to happen, and when you aren't the one bearing the burden of the welfare of the spirituality of other people. Despite the criticisms against him, Joseph Smith persevered on his mission, often facing challenges with a determination that could only come from deep faith and commitment in what he thought was right. And even if some of his actions can be seen as questionable in hindsight, it's essential to remember that he was a product of his time, grappling with issues in the best way that he knew how. Joseph was in uncharted territory. I don't think he did everything perfectly, and it's easy for me to say that I probably would have tried to do things differently if I was in his position, but I believe he was doing the best that he could. Simply pointing out flaws without proposing solutions or understanding someone's challenges is not constructive criticism, but instead being an armchair critic. This kind of criticism not only lacks substance, but also tends to demoralize and dishearten those who are genuinely trying to make a difference. We all have the power and the choice to become armchair critics, especially in our digital age where it's easy to voice our opinions from the comfort of our own homes. You don't have to agree with everything or even anything Joseph Smith did, but no good comes from being an armchair critic.